Let us begin this lecture by honoring the holy in our midst. For our prayer this morning, just remain seated as we pray with this prayer reading. Let us remember that we are in the most holy presence of the Holy.
Everyone please stand up for opening prayer. Let us all remember that we are the most friends of God. Lord, thank you for gathering us here today to be able to learn. We will give you the wisdom to understand what we will be taught today and give us encouragement about everything that we learn from the speakers. Ultimately, I will continue moving glad to do my actions for what you sing them back to himself. With these in our hearts.
Once again, good morning. To express words of warm welcome and the opening remarks, let us hear the message of the Chair of the Theology and Religious Education Department, Dr. Rico B. Marc.
Good morning, dear students, friends, faculty. I welcome you all to this second offering of the forum or lecture on what we mean by being a Jew or Jewishness. You are in a state or in a condition where you have so many questions in life right now. And Thread 1 tells you that all of us, all of humanity, is in search for a great meaning of life. All of us pursue that search. And in pursuing that search, we raise questions about life. What do we want to do? What directions do we want to pursue? Choices, meanings are important for us right now. This morning, in our lecture, in the lecture of Dr. Ellis, we'll be treated to a very important question. A question that is offered by one of many religious traditions. We know religious traditions offer varied answers to the questions that we offer in life. Varied answers to the question of meaning. One of those answers will be offered and explained this morning through our guest lecturer. And I hope as you listen to his presentation, you will somehow connect and find more answers and perhaps some meaning to the questions that you are raising in one of the religious traditions that we hold so dear in our history, Judaism or Jewish life or Jewish faith. So I welcome you, and I hope that you will learn more from this presentation. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Barry, for your words of wisdom and encouragement. Before we introduce our distinguished speaker for today, we shall be providing pieces of paper so you may write your questions and comments. Please indicate your name and your course or affiliation. May I now call Mr. Milan Thread Faculty, to introduce our visiting professor and guest speaker for today's talk.
Our distinguished speaker and visiting professor is a theologian, historian, writer, and photographer who walks the beach each morning at sunrise and continues to write and lecture around the world. He has two prophetic sons, Aaron and Isaiah, who are now making their way in the world. He was made full professor in 1988 and remained at Maryknoll until 1995, when he assumed a position first as a senior fellow at Harvard's Center for the Study of World Religions, and then a visiting scholar at Harvard's Center for Jewish Studies at Baylor University. He has published more than 100 articles and has authored and edited more than 25 books. Among them are A Year at the Catholic Worker, Peter Morin, Prophet in the 20th Century, Faithfulness in an Age of Holocaust, Toward a Jewish Theology of Liberation, Beyond Innocence and Redemption, Confronting the Holocaust, and Israeli Power, and most recently, The Heartbeat of the Prophetic. Friends, fellow faculties, please help me welcome with a big round of applause, Professor Marc H. Ellis, PhD.
Thank you very much for those warm words of introduction. This is my last presentation at LaSalle. I've been here almost a month, and it's with deep sadness that I will be leaving. I have tried to speak the truth to all the audiences I've spoken to, in major lectures, in class presentations. That is why I travel. So I want to share the truth as I see it about what it means to be Jewish in our time with you today. This is a famous rabbi from Eastern Europe who came to the United States during the Holocaust and was the teacher of my teacher. His name is Abraham Joshua Heschel, and he wrote, "Who is a Jew? A person whose integrity decays when unmoved by the knowledge of wrong done to other people." We could say, who is a Catholic? Who is a Muslim? A person whose integrity decays when unmoved by the knowledge of wrong done to other people. Today I want to share with you the finding of my voice, which is not only mine, but you also have a voice, and somehow that could become our voice. This is a picture of a photo of me at my bar mitzvah when I was 13 years old. And that is a Jewish ceremony where boys, and now girls as well, take on responsibility for our own lives, but also for the life of our people. We become sons and daughters of the covenant, and therefore we are initiated into adulthood. But that is only the beginning of our journey and my journey. And at the university, some years later, I had a teacher named Richard Rubenstein who wrote the book After Auschwitz, which was an attempt by him to find his voice. What does it mean to be Jewish in history, but in our context? What does it mean to be Jewish after the Holocaust? Because the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered systematically in Europe, raises so many questions for all of us, but also, especially for Jews, where was God at Auschwitz? Where was humanity? What do we as Jews do after Auschwitz? And then he wrote a book titled The Cutting of History. Now, Rubenstein was not what I call a huggy. He was not a person that coddled us, made us feel better. He told the truth as he saw it, and let us come to our own conclusions. Because Rubenstein said that after the Holocaust, Jews couldn't depend on God. We could only depend on ourselves, because history itself was a cycle of violence and atrocity. You were either underneath that violence, like Jews were in Europe, or you had power. You have power, Rubenstein says, keep it, no matter what. That's the lesson he got from the Holocaust. But it wasn't enough for me. One thing that Rubenstein and most Jews would say is after the Holocaust, we need Israel as our power. That will protect us against what happened in the Holocaust. But I wanted to see Israel for myself. I wanted to see what was going on there, because I had also read about Palestinians, these Arabs in Israel and Palestine, which had been displaced by Jews in the creation of the State of Israel. So in 1973, after studying with Rubenstein, I went to Israel to see for myself. I'm having serious problems. Okay. Some years later, in 1987, I went to speak in Israel. I had gone back several times since 1973, and I had seen that Jews who looked like me, that is European and American Jews, were on top, and Arabs and Palestinians were on bottom. And as a Jew, whose integrity decays if I use our power to oppress another people, I had to speak. And this is the book I wrote when I returned from Israel in 1986 and spoke about in 1987 toward a Jewish theology of liberation. This was my voice coming to me, simply raising a very simple but complex question. Had our power liberated us? We needed power after the Holocaust, because without any power, we were helpless. We now had power, but we were oppressing another people. I had to ask myself, to be Jewish now, was that enough? Or did we need another question about liberation? My own conclusion, Jews cannot be liberated without those who we now oppress, the Palestinian people. And here's the second edition of my book, published a few years later, and I found a Palestinian who heard me speak, Naim Atiq, a Palestinian Christian, and he had also written the question of Palestinian liberation, because now they were suffering somewhat like Jews had suffered. So he tried to address the question, what does it mean to be a Palestinian Christian, a Palestinian Muslim, in the situation where they were oppressed, and we began to work together. Now, my son, Aaron, was being carried by his mother as I wrote toward a Jewish theology of liberation. I didn't think of it at the time, but subconsciously, as I was trying to understand what it means to be Jewish today, subconsciously, I was preparing to hand my tradition down to my children. As a father, I wanted to tell my sons, I have two now, Aaron and Isaiah, that we are good and just. That's what I want to tell them. But I had to tell them something else. We could be good and just, we have been good and just, but right now we are not being good and just. And Aaron, as he grew up, then had to find his voice as a Jew. What did he have to say about being Jewish? Here he is playing baseball. He's an excellent baseball player. And here he is when he wrote this letter to the Jewish Council of Houston, who had come to my university in the year 2000 to speak about how the Palestinians were creating all the problems. Aaron and I were there. He was hitting me in the ribs to say something to this Jewish-Israeli council. I had a meeting with the council the next day. I said, Aaron, he has a right to speak. I will speak to him tomorrow. In my office, we were yelling, very Jewishly. It's okay. But before the council came to my office, after I had dropped Aaron off at school, he wrote this letter, which he sent to me by email to present to the council, and I will read part of it to you today. Dear Council, I met you at the dinner put on by Baylor University and the Conference for Christians and Jews. I am the son of Marc Ellis. I would like to express my deepest anger for what you said, which was both unfounded and untrue. In your speech, you went on about how the Palestinians have all the rights that the Israelis have. This is in no way true. Until you stop pointing tanks and helicopter gunships at the Palestinians, do you really expect them to feel security that you won't bomb them into oblivion? You are still monitoring everything that they are doing. You are cutting them off to the world by building walls around their territories and by scaring them into irrational violence with the violence that you too are partaking in. How can you as a member of the Israeli government sleep at night knowing that you as a people are firing bombs, firing missiles at defenseless, innocent Palestinians? What you are doing is pressing your heel against the throats of people who can't do anything to defend themselves. I noticed you made reference to the Bible. Didn't the Lord our God Adonai tell us to be kind to the stranger because we were once strangers in the land of Egypt? You are now undermining the name of God as I see it. You, in essence, are saying that whoever has the most powerful thugs, Gestapo, army, or secret police, should rule regardless of their political views. This is exactly what led to the suffering of so many fellow Jews and others. This also is what's happening to the Palestinians, even as you read this, only on a smaller scale. I don't know how you really support your views, except for the fact that Israel is more powerful than the Palestinians, and therefore should rule over them, which of course is just downright stupid for anyone to think this, much less an entire nation. Thank you for your time, and I would greatly appreciate a letter back as I am trying to find out the truth. My son is very polite at the end. Aaron was about 13 years old, becoming a son of the covenant, finding his Jewish voice. It's interesting, now that Jewish voice of my son comes back to inform me and other Jews. This is Aaron today. On the beach, I live 2 blocks from the beach in Cape Canaveral. He's wearing a Palestinian keffiyeh that he got from Palestinians in Israel, Palestine. And he's just started a chapter, Jewish Voice for Peace. This is a collection of Jews around the United States and elsewhere who have come together. It's not only for peace, it's also for justice for Palestinians. This exemplifies Aaron and Jewish Voice for Peace, the renewal of the Jewish prophetic voice in our time. They are saying that what it means to be Jewish is to be justice, theoretically, but also concretely, and that we as Jews can only move forward with those who we are now oppressing, the Palestinian people. Well, this is my little guy Isaiah, a long time ago. And that's him now. I don't know which picture is better. But he's also trying to find his voice as a Jew. So what does it mean to be Jewish now? To embrace justice, to embrace the other, those who are different than us, who are not so different, really, to embrace Palestinians. Embracing Palestinians, our other, we embrace ourselves as Jews. Our integrity does not decay, it's enhanced by embracing the other, who is not only other. So my question to you, how do you find your voice? What is your voice? Who do you embrace? What other do you embrace? It could be someone outside your country, groups within your country, the poor. What does it mean to be Catholic now? What does it mean to be Filipino now? Here's my religious statement. If your redemption causes the suffering of others, it cannot be your redemption. If my redemption, say the state of Israel, or say the United States, causes suffering to others, it cannot be my redemption. If your Catholicism causes suffering to others, as it has historically, to Jews, for instance, it could not be your redemption. So then we ask, what is our redemption? Well, traveling around the Philippines, this was in Laguna, I was traveling in a school and touring the school. I asked my question not only for the Philippines as an outsider, but in traveling here, I had to ask myself again, what does it mean to be Jewish? My own sense, and here is where I will close, is that I can only be Jewish with others who are Jewish and non-Jewish. Our world is too big and too diverse for me to be faithful as a Jew, only as a Jew. I am Jewish, but I can only be Jewish with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis, for such a mind-opening but very challenging talk lecture about Jewish tradition. We are now opening the floor to your comments and questions. There are 2 microphones provided on both sides of this hall. Please do not hesitate if you have questions to ask to Dr. Ellis. Or you may also submit the papers containing your name, comments, and questions, and Professor Ellis will address them.
Hi, good morning. I have a question. So, I have a German friend, and she told me that in Germany, they constantly remind them about what Hitler did to the Jews in order to remind them that we can't repeat this again. And so, they have field trips to Auschwitz and everything. And I was wondering, like in the Jewish community, do you have the same thing? Have you ever been to Auschwitz?
Yes, I have. And I wrote a book afterwards about my trip titled Ending Auschwitz. And this is what I meant by that. The memory of suffering in Auschwitz, but the memory of suffering, say, in the Philippines or elsewhere, can be used in 2 ways. It can be used as a blunt instrument against others. We've suffered. We don't care if you suffer. We need to be powerful. Or as a bridge of solidarity to others.
So the reminder in Germany of the Holocaust is important. We also need to be reminded of the Holocaust, but the question is, how do we use it? Too often it's being used to say, I don't care about Palestinians, we need power. But it's also used by Jews to say, what happened to us should never happen to anyone. So the memory of suffering is one of the elements of finding your voice. So remind us of the Holocaust? Yes. Remind us of the suffering in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, in the Philippines? Yes. What do we do with that memory? That's our question.
Thank you.
Questions, comments, feedback, Lasallians, insights you may want to share as you listen to the lecture?
Hi. I watched a TV show, and there's this Jewish family who held a bar mitzvah, and the mother is asking for kosher cupcakes. What's with kosher?
Kosher is a way of preparing food in certain Jewish homes that corresponds to biblical injunctions or the interpretation of the Bible about what can be mixed in the preparation of food and what shouldn't be. So it's part of Jewish law to eat kosher, which means a certain way of eating, and certain animals that you can't eat, like pig. And those are typically found as biblical injunctions, but most Jews don't keep kosher, as it's called. So it's a way of preparing food for the Orthodox Jews that goes back to certain interpretations of the biblical text.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Some say other Jews still hate the Germans. Is it true?
You have to say it again.
Some say the other Jews still hate the Germans.
Yes, yesterday was interesting. I was up at Maryhill Seminary. Oh, it was a tremendous group of people from all over the world. And, they had the welcome, and they had prayer, and then they had the end where they thanked me. And when the professor that was coming up when the professor who was thanking me came up,
There was a big roar from the audience. He was a German priest. For Jews, even for me, it's been very difficult to embrace German culture and sometimes Germans after the Holocaust. But I started traveling to Germany in the 1980s to see for myself. I've spent a life traveling among people that I'm not supposed to. First Christians, then Palestinians, and then Germans. And I found, of course, among Germans many who were deeply repentant over the Holocaust, including the German professor priest yesterday. That history cannot be forgiven. That's not my issue. The question is, what do we do as Jews with Germans who want to move forward? On the other hand, we have a problem with Germany from the Jewish prophetic side. In their repentance for the Holocaust, they have not only paid Israel billions of dollars, but they supply Israel with armaments, and especially nuclear submarines. And I have questions about that. So, we have to pay attention to history, the suffering of history, and when you oppress others in history. But both Germans and Jews need to move forward. And so I'm committed, and many other Jews are, to moving forward with those Germans who are repentant from the Holocaust, support Jews, are in solidarity with Jews, but also now in solidarity with Palestinians. That's how we create a future, not just keeping barriers, but not just crossing barriers for itself, crossing barriers and boundaries in a new way. So, now my father, who served in World War II and ended up in Germany after the war, hated Germans, and he wasn't going to let that go. I understood his position, but I, to find my voice, had to come to terms with Germans now. Now, is that an easy situation? No, still for me, sometimes not. But Palestinians with Jews, it's not easy for them either. And for you sometimes, it may not be easy with Americans because of our history here. So that's a challenge, right? Series of challenges for us.
Here's one written question for Dr. Ellis, since you mentioned about the other. What if the others attack your religion or belief? Should you still consider them as others?
Well, I'm not a pacifist, so we need to be able to protect ourselves sometimes, yeah, sure. But I don't want to simply stay in that modality of protection. I want to see, even if some attack us, if others from the same group or religion don't want to attack us, I want to move with them. So, for instance, Christianity, historically from Europe, has attacked Jews, sometimes very violently. But today, there are many Christians who don't want to attack Jews, just the opposite. I have to go with them. So, there are times when we need protection, but we also can reach out to others who want something different from their own community or people.
Hello, good morning, sir. May I ask, with regards to your book, Toward the Jewish Theology of Liberation, how did you philosophically approach in answering the question of who are you as a Jew? I mean, I bet not all Jewish people see the same perspective in this voice.
Well, I saw what I needed to see. I saw Palestinians being oppressed by my people. Then I had to think, how did that come about? What can I say?
what do I need to do? So I had to go inside myself. I had to read. I had to think. I had to listen. But the main thing was, there was something inside of me that said, no. And then I had to figure out what does that mean? So toward Jewish theology of liberation is no, that's not going to happen. We cannot do that. And yes, this is what we ought to do. So I'd like to tell you that I went on a philosophical theological quest in the beginning, but that would be untrue. There was something in me that as a Jew said, no, this is the wrong direction. I think that's in all of us anyway, right? We all know. Of course, sometimes our community says, what you know is wrong. Don't know that. Don't see that. Don't do that. But there are also parts of our traditions, Jewish and Catholic, for example, and Islamic, and Buddhist, and Hindu, conscience that says, what I'm seeing is wrong. We can't do that. So I just knew it was wrong. Then, what to do about it.
Thank you very much.
Another question, Dr. Ellis, still along the issues of violence and peace, and a question of hope. With the constant conflict between Israel and other Arab countries, is there any future where there will be peace among them?
Well, it doesn't look good now. And by the way, there are Arab countries that very much support Israel now. Because Egypt, for instance, has a dictatorship that wants the support of Israel, often against its own people. And Jordan and Saudi Arabia. It's a very complex situation, even if they say bad things about Israel, or even if they're upset, they can still be in league with them. And of course, if you look at the Middle East, Syria, oh my God. And Libya, oh my God. And the Palestinians, oh my God. It doesn't look good. Now my son Aaron, my big guy, says that there's going to be peace and justice in Israel-Palestine in my lifetime. Now there's all sorts of speculation about how many more years I'll be around. Right now I'm feeling good, especially after the karaoke last night. I'm not going to sing for you, I don't think. But he wants that to happen for us together. That's his dream, and he's working very hard. I'm more pessimistic. But if you invite Aaron here, he'll tell you just how it's going to happen. Yeah, we have to be in it for the long haul. This is the question of fidelity. If I could speak like this around the world over my lifetime and there would be justice, that's worth it. That would be worth it, big time. But if I'm convinced, and I have been for a long time, that it's probably not going to happen, and I still do this, why am I doing it? And even if I get hit in the head, turned away, not allowed in to universities or other places, why do it? Why not just be quiet? See, because if it's easy, if it's success that we're after, we can't really tell the truth. I want success, of course. Of course I want success. But if I was focused on success for myself or for Israel-Palestine, maybe I would be quieter. Maybe I would trim my sails. That wouldn't bring success, but it might be an easier journey. So when we find our voice, this is I'd like to tell you, when you find your voice, it's going to be easy sailing. It's going to be more difficult. Because success is very hard to find. when you find your true voice. Now, you might say finding your true voice is a success. Okay.
Good morning. I have a question for you, sir. There is always a belief with each religion that the religion is the best or correct. So, as a Jew, what is your opinion about this?
Oh boy. I love being Jewish. Yeah. Well, I am Jewish. I love being Jewish. I have ambivalent feelings about Christianity because of our history, and ambivalent feelings about Catholicism because of our history. But I have also benefited a lot from being among Catholics and other Christians in their new incarnation. Now still, when I see a cross, we were talking about this yesterday, the first thing I think of is violence. Now I know that's not what you think of. It's a very precious symbol to you. But as a Jew, when I see a cross, that's the first thing I think of. Then I have to say, Marc, historically, that's what it meant for Jews. But the person wearing that cross, most people wearing that cross today, do not want that violence for their own tradition or against Jews. So I have to, a reality check. I can't say that I'm not ambivalent. I can't just be ambivalent. For Christians, relating to Jews is difficult because you grew up hearing stories in the Gospels, sometimes singing songs that can be very negative toward Jews. So I would say that Christians are ambivalent toward Jews. That's okay. What we do with it, sometimes men are ambivalent about women. Sometimes, a lot of times, women are ambivalent about men. What do we do with our... When I tell Aaron and Isaiah, years ago, I can't tell them anymore, you can't do this. And they would have ambivalent feelings about me. They love me, but they want to do what they want to do. So, with religions who have often fought, there's ambivalence. The question is, what do we do with it to move forward? So, as a Jew, I am very grateful for being Jewish. Deeply grateful. As others should be grateful for who they are.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, sir. What do Jewish people think about Jesus?
I'm so glad you asked. This always comes up. It's a very good question. I'm going to tell you something that may be very startling. So, get ready. Most Jews don't think about Jesus a lot. That's one. Most Jews, it's not part of our faith tradition, so most Jews don't think about Jesus. When they do think about Jesus, some of it can be very negative. Not about Jesus, but a way Christianity carried Jesus. Then some Jews like me, a very distinct minority, have gone among Christians the way I have, and have read and studied about Jesus, and try to see Jesus within the Jewish tradition, because he was Jewish, right? I always say to Christians, Jesus wasn't a Christian, he was a Jew. And by the way, when you talk about the Hebrew Bible, or what you call the Old Testament in a negative way, know this, that's the only testament Jesus had. And as I say, it was the only one he needed. And when he went into the synagogue, because he was Jewish, right, and he couldn't go into a church, do you remember who the scroll he read from? Isaiah, my second son's name. So, let me go back. Most Jews don't think about Jesus. It's not important to them. When they think about Jesus, it can be negative, not about Jesus, but about Christians and the way they've carried Jesus. Then others, like me, but very few, have come into contact in a deep way with Christians who are reevaluating the life of Jesus, and we may get to some common ground about his Jewishness, about his prophetic quality, and then it gets really interesting.
Thank you very much.
I have here a question that is somehow related to the last question asked, and this pertains to the similarities and differences between Christianity and Judaism. This requires ours, of course, to answer, but I would like to, whoever asked this question, refer you to your Thread 1 Prof during your class time to ask this question. Moving on to the next question. This is something personal, Dr. Ellis, and Wolf's family, and your thoughts as a father. Would you allow your sons to intermarry? And is it allowed in your community?
Another good question. First of all, most Jews today in the United States are intermarrying. I expect probably that my sons will both intermarry. But I also think that it may be that both women that they marry will become Jewish. I know this is very complicated. Sorry. Trying to be good. Now that's not negative, by the way. I'm going to give you my spin on it. I know this is a little strange, but hey. There are some, when you're in a family, often you want a common bond. And sometimes that common bond is religion. Now, in the Philippines, you don't really have a problem for most of you, right? But in a diverse culture like the United States, or more diverse, you've got all sorts of religions and non-religions. And Jews and Christians have become very close in the United States, which is very beautiful. And sometimes Christians who marry Jews either would like to be Jewish on their own, or want to be in a family way Jewish, or as a Christian want to come into solidarity with Jews because of the history of anti-Semitism. So I expect, I know this is a total bias, so I'm just sharing with you my bias. I hope that both my grandchildren, although I can't think of myself as a grandfather, but I'm old enough. I know, you know that. I hope they raise them Jewish. But the chances are that both intermarry, and most Jews in the United States are intermarrying, with a good percentage of their partners becoming Jewish, some celebrating both holidays, for instance, and having both faiths. You have everything. So you have, the United States, it's a new form of religiosity that's forming there, because even when you're Jewish in a Christian culture, there are elements of Christianity within you. And in the United States, even if you're Christian, there are elements of Jewish. Of course, Jesus is a Jew and all, but also the culture has. So culture makes a big part in it. I just have, actually, I'll be happy if they're happy.
Another written question. What if Germans want to become Jewish? Would you accept them as a Jew, knowing what happened in the Holocaust?
I have known Germans who have become Jewish. You can become Jewish through conversion, and I have a number of friends who have become Jewish, and I know some Germans who have become Jewish. My own view is it's not important whether they're Jewish or not, but what they think about their history and how they relate to others, including the refugees coming into Germany, and to Jews. So I do know Germans who have become Jews out of repentance for the Holocaust, and that can be very beautiful. But if you say you're Jewish, I accept you as Jewish, and that includes Germans who become Jewish. Now again, I have to be honest with you, when Isaiah, who was very good in Latin, by the way, wanted to take German, I had a discussion with him. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I didn't want him to speak German.
It's true. And he said, "Get over it, Dado." He calls me Dado. He says, "Get over it." I very rarely tell the kids what they can't do because, they're good and they do what they want anyway. But that was difficult for me if he had become a fluent speaker of German. But that's retro. That's my baggage. See, we all have baggage, and your professors have baggage. Professor's not listening now. But you're going to have baggage too. It'll be different baggage.
Good morning. Considering the state of conflict in Palestine and other Jewish states, how does and how did the Jewish community cope with the violence towards them?
You mean in the Holocaust or you mean in Palestine?
In general.
Okay. Well, the Holocaust, we were just inundated with violence. And by the way, those who violated us, most of them were baptized Christians. Hitler was a Catholic, by the way. And what shocked me once, I have given many lectures in Germany. I gave a lecture in a church. Now, they had invited me. This is how history moves. And when we walked out, he pointed to a building, and he said, "Do you know what that building is?" I said, "No." He said, "That's where Hitler went to high school." Well, if Hitler went to high school there, it's likely on Christian holidays that he went to that church. I don't know that for a fact, but it's very likely. So we didn't have any power to protect ourselves from Hitler and the Nazis and those who helped him. With the Palestinian question, Palestinians are upset. They're extremely upset. Very, 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 very upset. Because their land's been taken. Their land's been taken. And their livelihoods have been taken. So when Palestinians commit violence against Jews, we have to ask the question, who started the violence? And who is perpetuating state violence, systematic violence, structural violence? So Jews have a right anywhere we are to be protected, absolutely, and secure, totally. But we don't have a right to oppress another people. So we can use force when we're being attacked. But we can't use force against others who are weak and vulnerable. That's my view.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. I'm Brendan from A58. My question is, you mentioned earlier that recently girls have been allowed to celebrate bar mitzvah. Why weren't they allowed back then if its purpose is to welcome the child as a son or daughter of the covenant? And how were they allowed now?
You mean girls?
Yeah, in bar mitzvah.
Yeah,
Why?
well, because Judaism, like Catholicism, is a patriarchal religion. It's oriented around men in power. So Judaism was like that. So men became sons of the covenant. But then, like with Catholicism, there were movements that said, well, wait a minute, what about the girls? What about women? So we had a lot of Jewish feminism that said the girls have to become daughters of the covenant. So it's changed. But way back when, the emphasis was on boys and men because the religion was oriented in that way. Now, in many parts of Jewish life, that's changed, not at all. But many places, in the conservative and reform movements especially, girls get bat mitzvah just like boys get bar mitzvah.
Thank you, sir.
This is a question of self-identity. As a Catholic, how do we find our voice? Anyone can answer, Dr. Ellis can also address the question.
Well, that one's up to you guys. But I've met many Catholics who have, of course, all over the world, including here. So we all have a voice, Muslim, Jewish, secular, Buddhist, and we all have traditions that can help us with that. And also we all have traditions that say don't do that. So we all have to struggle with our cultures, our traditions, our nations, our religions. And it's very important that we all find our voices.
Good morning, sir. As a Jew, do you believe that there is second life, that there is eternity in heaven or hell?
In general, Jews believe in more life here. There's an emphasis on here. There's very little on the afterlife. There's very little on the afterlife. I had to think about it recently because my little guy Isaiah is in a PhD program, and he's TAing, he's a teaching assistant in a course called Heaven and Hell. And he wrote on his Facebook that he was thinking about death. And I said, as a Jew, why does heaven and hell raise that question? Because most Jews don't think about heaven or hell. And he said, well, Dado, I'm thinking about it. And then I had to say to myself, what do I think about it? Because I've thought about it before, but now another time in relation to my children. And I thought about death. You know, I write a lot, and sort of endlessly. Just part of my being. And I thought about death, that one morning I won't wake up and won't be able to write about what I'm thinking, about the world. So it's very Jewish to think that in death, the conversation with yourself and with others, including my children, is over. Now I know you may not want to hear that, but you've asked me about what Jews think. In general, Jews don't think much about the afterlife, about heaven or hell. Now, I want to go to heaven. I want to tell you why. I want to go to heaven to greet all my Christian friends and say, hi, how are you? Welcome. Especially evangelical Christians who believe that because I don't believe in Jesus, that I'm condemned to hell. So I really would like to go to heaven for that reason. To say hello to everybody and see the smile. I'll be smiling. There's another reason I'd like to go to heaven. I'd like to have an in-depth discussion with God. I really want, and Jesus too, no problem. Because in the Jewish tradition, we can not only talk with God, we can argue with God. And I have a few things on my mind in relation to God. Like, okay, where were you in the Holocaust? But okay, where are you in the Israel-Palestine conflict? Where are you? So, if you look at the Bible, Jews have a lot of questions about God. So I want to go to heaven for two reasons. One, to welcome Christians who don't think I'm going to get there. And two, to have an in-depth discussion with God.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Just want to acknowledge that another person also asked the same question along the Jewish concept of heaven or afterlife. Another question, what is your book, Unholy Alliance, Religion and Atrocity in Our Time about? And why entitle it Unholy Alliance?
I hope one day your library has that book. That's another question. Okay. Thank you for remembering that book. Actually, the title of the book that I gave it was Atrocity and the Language of God. That's my title. The publisher gave it the title Unholy Alliance. The reason why I gave it that title, and I still think about that title every time somebody mentions the title it actually has, is because the central question in that book is, what can we say about God as Jews, but also Latin Americans who are suffering, Filipinos who have suffered, Africans who are suffering? What can we say about God when atrocity has hit us so hard? So the Unholy Alliance in that title is about how religion and atrocity can go hand in hand. For instance, the Pope, Francis, just went to the synagogue in Rome. How many of you know about that story? Hello? Your Pope. Well, that will do that another day. Anyway, so religion can go well very easily with killing others, but religion also can keep us from killing. It's both. So the unholy alliance is, that's the way it's been often, but there's also an alternative. And by the way, my graduate student who's a professor now of Jewish studies says that was my best book. Unfortunately, I published it in 1997, and I said to him, Santiago, who's from Latin America, stop saying that. I've been writing and writing and writing. It's like a singer who has a hit and has to re-sing that song forever.
Good morning. I have a quote here from a fellow Jew, and he said that to gain your own voice, you have to forget about it being heard. Do you agree with that quote?
Well, that's interesting. It could mean many things. I don't agree with forgetting it about it being heard, but it might, what I would agree with is that you have to do it without the prospect of success. You want success, of course, but you can't, if success is your only sense, you're going to have to trim your sails. So I'm not sure what that means, but I think a Jewish voice and a Catholic voice, a Filipino voice, these voices, we need to speak. I said, but we need to speak, knowing that it may not be successful right then. So that's what I say about that quote.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, we will now close our open forum. I have a couple of questions here that could be best answered also during your Trend 1 class. Okay? And then one question that involves American politics. So at the moment, thank you, Dr. Ellis, for doggedly answering our questions. For the giving of token to the speaker, may we request Dr. Rito Barin, Chair of the Theology and Religious Education Department, to come up the stage. Ms. Dorothy Javier, Trend 1 Coordinator, will read the citation. After giving of the token, she will be addressing the closing remarks.
The Theology and Religious Education Department, College of Liberal Arts, DLSU University. This token of appreciation is presented to Professor Marc H. Ellis, PhD, for his invaluable contribution as a resource speaker of the Trend 1 lecture on Judaism entitled Jewish, What Does It Mean to Be Jewish? Understanding the Meaning of Jewish Tradition, given this 4th day of February 2016 at the William Shaw Little Theater, DLSU University, Philippines. Okay, again a round of applause to Dr. Marc. Our dear Dr. Marc H. Ellis, beloved LaSallians, guests, and participants of the lecture on Judaism, on behalf of the Theology and Religious Education Department, it is indeed my pleasure to express gratitude to all those who made this activity a reality. To our dear Professor Ellis, thank you for the words of wisdom, especially for challenging and disturbing us to be open and rethink our ideas and views about life, humanity, justice, compassion, spiritual preferences, and for being open for more conversations. To all who prepared this activity, our thread secretaries, Ms. Fem Aguilar, Ms. Irene Bergancia, to Dr. Rito Baring, the thread chair, and Dr. Fides del Castillo, vice chair, our supportive thread and thread 1 faculty, especially those who are here present, Mr. Mel Leal, Mr. Almozol, Mr. Gerard Ramos, Sister Rosary Olano, Mr. Jacqueline, Father Salcedo for sending their classes to participate, and to the other professors in the university who sent their classes, to Mr. Alvenio Mosol Jr. for serving as the Master of Ceremony and Moderator of the day, and to our participants, you, the Lasalians, both from the undergraduate and graduate students, our deepest gratitude. Let me finish by thanking you for your active participation in the talk and the open forum. This has provided valuable input to the ideas we want to develop with you and for the religious solidarity we are seeking. May everything be offered back to God's greater glory and for the good of His people. May we leave the Lord in our hearts forever. Thank you, good day, and blessings to all of us.
Please rise and let us close our gathering this morning by reciting our Lasallian prayer. Our Lasallian prayer all together. I will continue, O my God, to do all my actions for the love of you. St. John Baptist, the Lasal. Love Jesus in our hearts. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you for coming.